An opportunity for us to look forward, to understand the role of artists and what we as citizens can do to help our world.
How can the work we make have an impact on the world? I mean, for me, the challenge is, it's one thing to make a photograph. It's another thing to create a tool of visual activism.
I didn't feel I could write about climate change anymore. Nobody was listening. I felt like I was, there's an expression in Chinese to play a zither to a cow. And I thought, isn't there some other way to get into people's consciousness? And I thought, let's try it visually.
Sitting here is really a humbling moment as a writer to look at these images around us. It is kind of proof of concept of this extraordinary exhibition to just see the way in which these images have this way that is really beyond words.
I was raised to know that we are all interconnected and interrelated, not just to each other as humans, but to every living thing on this planet. When I make these images, these portraits of my ancestors' water, our ancestors' water, I know that I have a responsibility to tell their story. This is our heritage and our legacy. And I think it was Jacques Cousteau who said, "You will not love something you do not know, and you will not save something you do not love." I need you to fall in love with our planet. I need you to understand just how precious it is.
We don't get a choice anymore of we'll focus on this and we'll ignore that. The world doesn't tolerate that. And last time I looked, the planet itself doesn't necessarily accord to the political calendar of the year. It has its own rhythm, rhythms which have been violated by human impact on it. Our failure to act becomes a matter of intergenerational justice for what we morally then conclude can safely be bequeathed to the generation which follows us.
What role are our generations meant to serve in securing our future, your granddaughter's future, your granddaughter's grandchildren's future?
One of the famous civil rights organizers once said in the 60s, nothing important is obtained without a demand. So when you say, what is the generation of older people in power now going to give your generation, what are you going to demand be given? And I say that not to shift the burden to you, but in recognition of the way our political system operates. Young people have always been in the vanguard of these morally based social movements demanding change. Political will is itself a renewable resource. Our job is to renew the political will to get this done.
Even these ecologically degraded spaces have a sort of poetry to them. They have a sort of beauty, and connecting to that feeling is one that opens you up to the environment rather than closes you off.
Hello and welcome to the third Spotlight session in our series this year. My name is Dhruvak Agarwal and I'm the Next Generation India Fellow for Affordable and Clean Energy and a member of the Engine Room's Planet Action Group. I am also a policy researcher based in India, working on ways to sustainably and reliably serve our rapidly growing demand for energy. We are thrilled to have you all here with us today. As you join, please introduce yourself in the chat and let us know which country you're joining us from. We began the session today with a powerful video from Coal and Ice, the exhibition, which truly and powerfully captures the urgency of addressing climate change. I hope you found it as impactful as I did. Please keep the video in mind as we go through today's session. We hope it will serve to inspire our thinking and discussions. Before we dive deeper, just to address one housekeeping item, if you have trouble understanding the spoken language, you are welcome to turn on the captions at the bottom of the screen. It is great to see such a full room today. For those of you who also joined us on 2nd April for the Engine Room launch with over 250 other young change makers, and for our previous two spotlights on 26th April and 12th June, a warm welcome to you and thank you for your continued support. If you're joining us for the first time, a warm welcome to you too. For those of you who might not be familiar, the Engine Room for the Future is our digital intergenerational platform led by young people to reimagine how the United Nations plans, thinks, and acts for the future. It is spearheaded by the Next Generation Fellows and 51 young visionaries, 86 of whom are from the Global South. We are committed to reimagining the United Nations for the 21st century. Last year, we had over 44,000 young people join us via various Engine Room activities. This year, we're going through a human-centered design process to build a learning agenda for a post-2030 sustainable development agenda, which we like to call the roadmap to 2100. So far, we have empathized with young people and defined our most pressing challenges for now and for the future. Today, our goal is to ideate. We will explore a wide range of innovative, actionable solutions for these challenges through collective brainstorming. The most promising ideas for today will directly feed into our next session, the fourth spotlight, where we will prototype them into action. Through this year's process of mobilizing, listening, and collaborating with young people, three issues keep coming up: the climate crisis, economic inequality, and the lack of political representation of young people. Our task today is to think creatively and propose solutions to these issues. Remember that while brainstorming, there are no bad ideas. We encourage out-of-the-box thinking because that can lead to transformative solutions. Our diverse panel of speakers will share their experiences to inspire and guide our brainstorming. Their insights will help us identify obstacles and opportunities, ensuring that our solutions are grounded in the real world. Now, to guide us through our first thought-provoking discussion, I'm excited to hand over to Eunice Adewusi, our Engine Room changemaker from the Planet Action Group, who will be moderating the fireside chat with Pele and Arsen. Eunice, over to you.
Thank you so much, Drovak, for that insightful introduction and for setting the stage for our discussion today. It's my absolute pleasure to continue the conversation with everyone here on the call, and I really look forward to hearing from our esteemed speaker. But before we dive into the fireside chat, please answer the poll you see on the screen with the question, what is considered the biggest obstacle to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, by 2030? I'm going to give us a few seconds to answer that, and I look forward to our answers. Thank you, everyone, for your thoughtful responses to the poll. It seems that the biggest obstacle to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 is the lack of coordinated partnerships and investments, which is a very big obstacle as identified by you. And this is a significant challenge that emphasizes the need for urgent action and bold ideas. As you are answering, let me present our next speaker to you, Pele Enasin, the Senior Advisor and Deputy Head of the United Nations Foundation. Just a minute. Yes. Pele Enasin is the Senior Advisor and Deputy Head of the UN Foundation's New York office, where he brings a wealth of diplomatic experience in international relations to his role. Before joining the UN Foundation, Pele served as a senior advisor at the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue. His impressive career also includes holding the position of Deputy Director General at Sweden's Ministry for Foreign Affairs and serving as Sweden's ambassador to Eritrea. Additionally, he served at the Swedish mission to the UN in New York, where he covered crucial areas such as sustainable development, humanitarian affairs, conflict prevention, and peace building. We are truly fortunate to have him here with us today to share his insights on bold ideas to turbocharge the SDGs. Thank you so much, Pele, for joining us today. So, the Coal and Ice exhibition we saw earlier at the beginning of this event highlights the urgency of climate action. As someone who grew up in Sweden, a country known for its progressive climate policies, how have you observed climate change specifically affecting your country?
Thank you, Eunice, and thanks for that introduction. But I think you actually forgot to mention the most important part, and that is that when I was about your age, I started my whole work in international business with following up on the Rio conference. I was a climate activist, and then I got into the government offices. So that's part of my CV that's not clearly stated, but that's how I all started, and that's also why I'm so thrilled to be here with all of you, because we need many of you out there engaged on all these issues. Now to your question, Yunus, I would like to answer really in three ways, because I think there are many ways in how we perceive climate change in Sweden, but there are a couple of interesting things. First of all, of course, it's the changing climate. So we have unusual droughts, unusual heavy rainfalls. The glaciers in the north of Sweden are pulling back. So we can all see the changes that are happening. We can feel the effects. But it's interesting when with some recent international polling, actually Swedish people come out at the bottom of people that feel affected by climate change. So it's interesting that a country which is seen as progressive and actually is doing lots of things, when you've asked the people, only about 16% of the Swedes believe that they are affected by climate change. And that, if you compare that to India, for instance, with this polling, shows that in India, almost 80% of people feel affected by climate change. So that's something interesting that we need to understand. You know, what do people feel? They can see the changes, but how riskful do they think that climate change is? So that's one aspect, the nature, what we see, what we feel. But the second thing which is happening, which is a part of the effect of climate change, is that when I now travel in Sweden, I can see windmills growing up everywhere. So the transition, the change, the science that is influencing decision making is clearly visible. Just 10 years ago, I would not see so many windmills around the country. Now they are everywhere. So we're harvesting. This is part of the change. And of course, in the north of Sweden, we have heavy investments into new industries where there will be production of green steel production, which is not fueled by fossil fuels, but by green hydrogen. So that's another part of climate change that we are actually mitigating and changing. The investments are now flowing into new industries and future green jobs. They're actually happening already now. Then there is a third aspect, I think, of climate change that I can sense in Sweden. And that's, maybe it's wrong to say backlash, but of course, so there was a policy introduced in Sweden there where you need to include biofuels into the petrol that you fill up your cars with. Made the petrol quite expensive, and of course the war in Ukraine and other aspects changed how fuel prices went around in the globe. So it was expensive to fill up your car, and so there was kind of a public backlash to all these policies, and that affected the politics in Sweden. There was a change of government, and one of the first things they did was to take away this demand on having biofuels in the fuel. Now that was, of course, then the carbon dioxide emissions increased for Sweden. But here's the third aspect that I would like to bring, and that's the agreements that we have at the international level implemented by the EU. So Sweden is a member of the European Union, and the European Union has made these commitments of the goals to achieve the treaties that we have agreed on. And Sweden cannot freely make their own choices. They have to abide by those rules. So just yesterday, the Swedish government announced that they will now reintroduce this biofuel insertion into fuel because otherwise they would have to pay lots of penalties to the EU. So I think that's an interesting aspect of also how climate change is shifting how we think and how we actually, it's not only about our nation. We are part of an international agreement. We need to live up to those, and there are institutional mechanisms that makes it impossible for us to make our own choices. We have to abide by this. So that those are different dimensions of how climate change is affecting us. So I hope that inspired some thinking about how you can also apply this in your own setting.
Thank you so much, Fele, for sharing those insights. And I love the fact that you made different examples of different countries. And this just shows the importance of international cooperation in advancing climate-related SDGs. So shifting gears a bit, the 2030 agenda emphasizes leaving no one behind. From your perspective as a senior advisor to the UN Foundation, what bold, unconventional ideas do you see emerging that could help us reach the most marginalized populations and ensure their inclusion in our efforts to achieve the SDGs?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Eunice, and I think I actually laid some base for that in my first answer. So right now, and I'm going to answer this especially related to SDG 13 when it comes to climate change, and there is this. As I explained in Sweden, it's a very you introduce it as a progressive country. It's been on the forefront of trying to mitigate and adapt to climate change and have good policies. But then I gave this example of backlash. So it's going to be costly. This is not going to be an easy transition into something the future. So there is definitely. We need to come up with bold ideas when it comes to the financing of this green transition. So I think financing is a core element of us going forward. So what kind of bold ideas are there? And so already, I said I started out as a climate activist, and when I got into the government offices in 1994. I was part of a discussion when we entered the EU. Shouldn't we impose some kind of levy on carbon dioxide, which is like in the European context? Sweden introduced CO2 taxation already in 1992. But so the idea was, should we push this in the EU? And the finance ministry said, no way, we cannot give the EU the right to tax our own population. This is a national thing. And you have all heard about this idea about carbon taxation at a global level. But there are so many questions around that. How who brings in the tax and who takes decision on how to allocate the income from this tax, etc. So there are many different difficult challenges with this bold idea. But maybe there are alternatives that are not as efficient as a global carbon tax, but where we could have commitments from the global north in particular, because that's where most of the emissions historically have happened. So there is this loss and damage discussion. Could there be a temporary 2% levy or ODA requirement on richer countries in order to infuse resources for the green transition? And on the other side, a commitment from governments that receive the resources to actually do this green transition. ODA is Official Development Assistance. Sorry, that's an acronym that I should have explained. So it's like development aid. So could we get commitments of having, of a temporary nature, an increased resource for investments into green transition? And I'm thinking especially the energy transition, which I think will be one of the most critical things for most countries. It's for every country, the energy transition is going to be the most difficult challenge.
Thank you so much, Fele, for sharing those bold ideas, and hopefully we'll be able to implement these ideas. We appreciate you sharing your invaluable perspective with us today, and we hope that definitely nobody will be left behind in the pursuit of SDGs. We hope to see more of you at the Engine Room future events.
Thank you, Eunice, and thanks for having me. And it was really a pleasure to be here, and I wish you fruitful and good discussions. See you all later.
Thank you very much. Now, as we continue exploring innovative approaches to some of the most pressing challenges facing young people today, we are shifting our focus to the importance of intergenerational collaboration. To guide us through this discussion, I am pleased to introduce Nandini Ariha, our Next Generation Indian Fellow for Oceans, who will be moderating our second fireside chat. Over to you, Nandini.
Thank you, Eunice. Hello, everyone. And that was a very good and insightful session from Pele on advancing international cooperation for climate-related SDGs, particularly focusing on financing and investments for SDG 13. As young people of today who inherit this world to shape a new and resilient future, to become stakeholders and ancestors of it tomorrow, it's critical and very important that we encourage and embed intergenerational collaboration to address global challenges. With this, it's my pleasure to welcome and invite our next speakers, Annie Green and Jamie Roach from the We Are Family Foundation. The family powers young people around the world who are changing the game with their ideas, innovation, and social good solutions. Today, our speakers will share valuable insights from their global study on intergenerational collaboration and how bridging the gap between generations can unlock innovative solutions to the pressing challenges facing our world today. Please join me in welcoming the We Are Family Foundation.
Hi, Nandini.
Hi. So as our speakers join in, I would also encourage all of you to share on what is the most important factor for successful intergenerational collaboration according to you. You will see a poll popping up on your screen as we kick this conversation off. I'm waiting to see what the results for this look like. So until we look at how the polls come up, until the results come up, Jamie and Annie, thank you for joining us. We're excited to have you here and hear about the global study. Just to, oh, there we have. Oh, wow, careful. We do have a tie. We have a tie for adequate funding and resources and careful planning and preparation. Well, Hopefully, this is somewhere that you can start off for your presentation. And it'll be great if you can walk us through some of your key findings from your research, particularly those that relate to youth challenges and in areas of climate action, since we've already spoken about financing for SDG 13 in the previous section, as well as economic inequality, because inflation and debt crisis, and that is a massive issue that a lot of young people are facing today, and future generations will also be seeing it. And finally, political representation, particularly taking a stab from Pele's example, India also has less than 2% of their parliamentarians under the age of 30. So we are also facing this quite a bit. So I would now also request if you can please share your slides. I would request you to please limit your presentation to about 5 minutes so we have time for another round of questions. And I will pipe in at the 4-minute mark to let you know that we're close to time, so you can summarize accordingly. Over to you, Annie and Jamie.
Thank you, Nandini. I'm not sure if I can see those slides. I believe there we go. Perfect. I'm going to try to talk as quickly as possible. Admittedly, I thought I had closer to 7 or 8 minutes before we wanted to throw it over to Jamie, and I'm hopeful to get as much as we can. But thank you for having us. We're thrilled to be in conversation today, especially in such a collaborative space. As you mentioned, We Are Family Foundation has a diverse array of programs, all designed to support young changemakers like yourself, Nandini, and so many folks on this call. Youth experts all around the world, including, and we're also, by the way, going to be bringing a bunch of those youth leaders to Sweden next year in a climate-focused opportunity. So Pele, it would be really great to connect after this. But one central thread that runs through all of our programs is the power, the importance, and the necessity of intergenerational collaboration, particularly as it relates to how we approach our urgent issues like the ones you've outlined today. Because simply put, at We Are Family Foundation, we believe that problems that span generations require leadership that does too. So thrilled to dive into our global study today and hopefully offer everyone some insights. And given we don't have a ton of time, I say we jump right into the first slide. Perfect, thank you. So here you're going to see our 3 key findings that emerged from our research. These specifically stemmed from a survey of 1,000 people from more than 100 countries across all ages. You can see the first one says that 96% of people believe intergenerational collaboration holds significant value and can generate positive change. 87% of people recognize the powerful potential of youth ideas and solutions in addressing global challenges. But that third one, only 19% of people across all ages agree that youth are currently given enough opportunities to lead and contribute to important social issues. So we agree that working together is powerful and helpful, and that youth add major value in our problem solving, yet it's not happening very often. So that is something that we hope to change. And let's go ahead and go to the second slide. So in order to set the stage for how to work together intergenerationally, we first thought it was important to highlight the unique values that young people bring to the table. And needless to say, this list could go on, and deservedly so. But based on our research, our purview of having been in the youth change-making space for 20 years, and a lot of our experiences this last year, these are the 5 that we identified. Youth possess a sense of hopeful urgency, they demand accountability, they embody inclusivity, they are digital natives in a tech-driven era, and they view their emotions as strengths, not weaknesses. There's a ton to unpack with all of these, and as well in our upcoming recommendations, but since we're limited on time, I'm going to choose just a few to quickly highlight and just scratch the surface on. So first, let's look at a hopeful sense of urgency. Youth leaders are fueled by the same existential threats that we all face, of course, be that climate change or be that income inequality. But young people bear this added responsibility, as we know, and this awareness of having to see us through these challenges for longer because they're going to be here longer. But what we have observed is that instead of seeing that solely as a burden, young people often see that as a longer runway, as an opportunity in and of itself, which causes them to ideate and to innovate and to collaborate with extra courage and extra risk and to approach their problems with urgency. And we also noted that alongside that urgency is accompanied hope, because at the end of the day, if you're trying to build for an uncertain future, you require faith in its potential. Let's quickly look at youth as digital natives in a tech-driven era. So obviously, having grown up online, Gen Z and Gen Alpha they inherently understand technology, both the benefits and the drawbacks of technology. They're more globalized than any generation before them. They have more access to information and knowledge of all sorts. And when I think of a value like this, I think of one of our incredible WAF youth delegates. Her name is Sneha Revanor. She's amazing. And she's truly building a social, cultural, and political movement for human-centered AI with youth at the forefront. She's holding tech giants accountable. She's advising on necessary safeguards for AI, and she's doing it all informed by her own lived experiences and those of the tens of thousands of high schoolers that she's working with. She just turned 20, by the way. And one more super quickly on this list before we move forward, youth seeing their emotions as strengths, not weaknesses. I think this not only reminds us, of course, of the power behind our emotions in mobilizing and inspiring large groups of people. We've seen that happen throughout the years many times. But this also reminds us that the challenges that we face, the ones we're here to discuss today, are deeply human with real world consequences, with lives on the line. That is emotional. This is emotional work. And it makes me think of another one of our incredible WAF youth delegates. His name is Russell Reed. He's an amazing conservationist, but he points this out a lot, that young people are unwilling to separate the emotional and the professional dimensions of their work, that they are carrying their fears, their anxieties, and their hopes, as we mentioned earlier, and their optimisms with them, especially into spaces and places like maybe sometimes the United Nations or COP, where change can feel slow or difficult. So that's a major value that youth bring. Let's go ahead and jump to that next slide and keep it moving. So these are our recommendations for intergenerational collaboration. And please know that for this list, and this is true for everything in our global study, these evolved collaboratively with thought leaders of all ages. So this entire global study itself is an intergenerational collaboration. But we have 6 of these. They are co-create from start to finish, center lived experience, lower barriers to entry, avoid assumptions about age, mitigate and repair harm, and be open to surprise. Same as last time, we'll pick just a few. Co-create from start to finish. What do we mean by that? Well, instead of inviting a young person to speak on your panel at the last minute to ensure youth representation or check that box, why not involve them to help you advise on the event from the very beginning, welcome their opinion earlier on, or in a political process, looking at political representation, don't seek the input of young people after a policy is everything but finalized. Bring them into the initial discussions and ensure that their voices are heard from that stage early on. Center lived experience. It's so important that we are valuing people's lived experiences, and especially those of young people. These experiences, be it being a digital native like Sneha or navigating the impacts of climate change like Russell, they often drive youth leaders to innovate and demand change urgently, as we mentioned earlier. And WAF has experienced this for over 20 years. But it's important to remember that it's easy to fall into this trap of assuming that years of experience, years alone, is directly correlated with wisdom. But it's simply not the case. And by valuing lived experience alongside years of experience, we open ourselves up to so many more outcomes in our collaborations. Looking at lower barriers to entry really quickly, this goes back to that third key insight that only 19% of people believe youth are currently given enough opportunities to participate. So let's change that. And how? By making it easier for them. And it really doesn't seem that hard. Our research is clear that it's not enough to simply invite young people to show up. What is the space that you're creating? You must support them in their participation. Ensure that they have what they need. Maybe that's a particular technology, maybe that's institutional knowledge, maybe your collaboration requires or would really benefit from some form of pre-work. And please, if you're able, and if you usually pay consultants for their time, please pay young people for their time and their expertise too. Finally, oh, go ahead.
I'm really sorry to cut you, but it is really good to hear about this. I know there's a website with the information where people can read and understand this in a bit more detail. It's just that we are close to wrapping up this particular segment. So if you have one last point that you can sort of summarize, and what's the main key thing that you would like people to take away from this particular segment, that would be super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, go to our website. Please engage with all of this information online. As you said, there's a lot more. There's also a really powerful final section called case studies, in which organizations across private and public sectors, organizations like IKEA, the World Bank, SAP, the Aspen Institute, have offered real world tangible examples that help show intergenerational collaboration in action as another resource for you. And that resource is evergreen. You can submit your own case studies and start to collaborate with WAF, which is something that we hope to do. And I'm hoping we still have a little bit of time for Jamie to talk a little bit about the methodology and the approach for this study, because it is a big piece of it and inherently encompasses how it was an intergenerational collaboration itself. But yeah, dive into everything online. There's a lot more from the young people who inspired this.
Thank you very much for those insightful findings, Annie. You will see in the chat box, Ines has put the link for the report already for you all to have a look at. I would like, obviously, I'm a bit intrigued by the creative methodology that you have used in your study, particularly how you involved youth as co-creators. So Jamie, if I gave you maybe a minute at max, and if you could explain how you sort of involve young people in the research process to influence the findings, that would be great. Like, what are like the 2 or 3 at max top takeaways that we should be knowing about this?
Thanks, Nandini. Absolutely. We followed our own guideline to co-create from start to finish. So we had a study advisory group comprised of 40 people. 60% were young people, which we were really proud of, kind of skewing the typical, tendency in the ecosystem to have more older folks. We had more younger folks participating, creating the questions, creating the aims of the study, creating the voice of the study. How can we make it approachable across generations? Secondly, we had young people translating it into 8 languages outside of English. We had young people serving as our study ambassadors, bringing it to their communities so that we can really emphasize the importance of this across the globe. We know that the youth voice is not monolithic. We wanted to make sure that there was diversity of perspective. And then more than anything, I was really excited about taking the data on the road. So it was a really unique opportunity to work with our youth delegates who attended 3 global convenings over the course of this time that we were doing the study, the UN General Assembly, COP28, and the World Economic Forum, where they brought in this data to intergenerational collaborations, to these convenings where they were able to really dissect and interrogate the data and figure out how to get more nuance in there, how to really understand where people's perspectives came in with this raw data. And I'll just give a quick example of that. The youth delegates that attended the UN General Assembly were the first to create the recommendations that Annie showed you. So we're really bringing in their ideas that were coming from their data and their experience, the qualitative and quantitative data. And then they passed their recommendations to the delegates going to COP, who brought in those recommendations, interrogated them, had conversations in this space, and then passed the refined recommendations to the delegates going to the World Economic Forum. And there they had an amazing roundtable of high-level leaders, both youth and older folks, that really continued to refine these recommendations. So Annie and I, are representing literally hundreds of young people and people across generations who brought in their refined perspectives around these recommendations and the value of youth. So I think those are a few examples. There's plenty more to check out on our study. Thank you, Inez, for putting in the link there. I'll do it again as well, but we hope that you can check it out. And we'll be going back to the convenings this year, and we're hoping that you can join us. If you're going to be there, we would love to collaborate with you. We would love to have the chance to continue, as Annie said, making this a living document, a living and breathing space that really looks at these incredible recommendations so that they can continue to be relevant and hopefully useful to folks in the future and now. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jamie. That was a lot of things that you were able to convey in a very short time. So thank you very much for that. And the We Are Family Foundation. Definitely, like, key takeaways for me was the need for power, necessity, problem spanning generations require leaders across generations. And surprisingly, the shocking fact, I was quite taken aback that we still have 19% youth that are given opportunities. I would have taken that percentage to be a little smaller, but great example at the end to really showcase how recommendations from UNGA in UN processes move into COP processes. So thank you very much for all the insights that you provided us through this. I would now like to pass the mic to Jack, who's the Next Generation Fellow on Future Generations and part of the Planet Action Group, for the next panel segment.
Thank you, Nandini. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. Gosh, it's been great to see the engagement in the chat and through the polls. We've been here for a little over half an hour or so, and I'm sure many of you are busy note-taking for our learning agenda, perhaps building networks through the chat, and possibly wondering, where do we go from here? Well, let's brainstorm together. Our goal today is to harness collective creativity and diverse perspectives in this room and to generate bold and actionable solutions. We're not just here to discuss problems, of course, we're here to reimagine our future and to create solutions that can reshape our world. And in light of this, we've assembled a distinguished panel to help set stage for our brainstorming. And these panelists bring a wealth of experience and fresh perspectives to help us reimagine solutions for those pressing issues that we'll be addressing. We'll be looking at the economic inequality. We'll be looking at climate crisis, the lack of political representation in local and global policy decisions, perhaps seeing the interconnectedness of all three of those issues. And they will also share their experiences and efforts to address the challenges under review. And therefore, it's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed panelists. Four of them joining us in this discussion today. We have Amin Sully, Bright Simmons, Lucy Agong, and our very own Prachi Shefgaonkar. So firstly, we have Amin Sully, a Ghanaian entrepreneur and the founder of Za Coal, a Ghanaian enterprise producing eco-friendly charcoal from city waste. His innovative approach addresses climate change while providing affordable cooking fuel. I'll try and get that word out. Cooking fuel. Amin's focus today is on the climate crisis. Welcome, Amin. Next, we have Bright Simmons, the founder of Pedigree, a social enterprise fighting supply chain fraud across 3 continents, a Tolberg Prize laureate and TED Fellow. Bright serves on various global boards and was named on Fortune's 50 World Greatest Leaders list. Today, he'll discuss economic inequality and innovative solutions. They're popping up on the screen there for us. Next, we have Lucy Agong, and hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly, a 23-year-old disability rights and sexual reproductive health advocate from Kenya. Drawing from personal experience, Lucy champions policy changes and improved healthcare access for young women with disabilities. Her focus today is on economic inequality as well, which is great to have you. And like I said, we have our very own Prachi Shefgaonkar, Next Generation India Lead Fellow and founder of Cool the Globe, an award-winning climate action app, and the youngest member of the Climate Leadership Coalition's Advisory Board. Prachi represented India at COP7 today. She'll address the political representation in decision-making, particularly for youth. Welcome to the 4 of you who've managed to get onto the screen, which is fantastic to see. Before we ask them questions, I want to hear from you all, those joining us today. The question which will appear on the screen for you: which skill do you consider most crucial for youth to tackle today's challenges? And you'll be able to rank the options on screen from most crucial at the top to least essential at the bottom. Click away, see as they appear on the screen there. I'll do so as well and submit my response. We'll be keen to see what the response is in a moment or so. We will also encourage you to take an active role in this discussion using the Q&A feature to ask panelists questions and the chat feature to share your observations, experiences, and comments. Your voice is important, and we're here to hear from you. Everyone was great at doing this at the launch, so I know that you are capable, that you are excited to contribute to this exciting conversation today as well, especially to those who are part of the action groups. Remember, this session is here to support you as you design and feed into the 2100 learning agenda. So use this space to build on your ideas and expand your horizons. I can see, let's see if we can see the results of that poll. The tension is building as that appears on our screens. There we go. So about 54% believing that the skill most crucial for young people is problem solving and creativity. Dare I suggest that all those skills are important, but we'll unpick some of those, I'm sure, with our speakers in a moment. I'm going to hand over to Mr. Amin to start us off, if I may. You're an entrepreneur, and I'm sure you've had to use many of the skills from our poll to achieve the rapid success of your endeavors. What are your thoughts on how everyone, especially the most marginalized, including women, girls, young people, and people in young countries, how can they use these skills to develop solutions to tackle the climate crisis? Over to you.
All right, thanks, Alice, for the opportunity. And then I welcome you all on this most important panel. And I can see my senior brother, Mr. Bright, on here. Good to see you too, Mr. Bright. All right. So to answer your question, let me take it from a more practical perspective. So usually we are taken through school, we're given the needed skills to pass exams, and then become whoever it is that we want to be, I mean, when we grow up or in the future. But usually we forget that whatever skill it is that we learn in school, we need to apply it in the real world. So for example, with my background, I studied development studies in school and went on to try and study law. Basically, my background has nothing to do with what I'm currently doing. What I'm saying is that whatever it is that we learn in our educational processes is just to enlighten us to address the problem that we face. And that is exactly what community development is to me. Because within every challenge is an opportunity. And our ability to spot the opportunities in these challenges is what makes the world a better place for us, especially for us as young people. What Zaco does is to convert coconut waste into charcoal out of curiosity by seeing coconut vendors producing too much waste on the streets and also coming to face the reality of deforestation and its impact on the climate. In fact, as I speak, the biggest news in the country today is government banning the export of food products. Why? Mostly because of drought in the most agricultural areas of the country. This is to tell you how negatively climate change is impacting us as a people. So what Zaco basically did was to look at the challenge and then find a solution for it by looking at the same thing that was the problem and then turning it around to solve and address the problem that our people were facing. I'll give you a few statistics. If you look at the general energy mix of the country, out of about 100%, over 60% of the Ghanaian population cook daily on either charcoal or firewood. And if this has gone on for over the past 50, 100 years, you can imagine how many forests Ghana has left. So if we don't find new and innovative ways of addressing the peculiar problems we have with ourselves, it's going to take literally in the next 10 years, we'll have the entire country turning into a desert. And we know how difficult that will be for us as a country. So to young people that are following and listening to what discussions we are having today, I just want us to get a look at it beyond just an educational problem, beyond just a problem for the general masses to address, but also own the problem, put ourselves in the problem. There's no problem without an opportunity. And where we are able to address that problem, where we are able to find the solutions to that problems, one, we don't just create jobs for ourselves, we create jobs for others. We solve the problems for the general community. And then we make money since it's a business as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Amin, for sharing your insights in light of your expertise in sustainable energy. Every challenge is an opportunity. If that's a quote that we can all stick to throughout the day session and beyond, that's a great one. And new innovations, the basic needs of cooking still requires us to think innovatively about how we address those challenges. Well, let's turn our attention to the unique challenges faced by young women with disabilities. Lucia Gong, as I mentioned, is a young disability rights advocate, and you've experienced these challenges firsthand. We've heard about the importance of those with lived experiences, and we'll get to have that opportunity today. Now, considering that 1 billion people living with disabilities are in developing countries, and women with disabilities have significant barriers to access jobs. Can you share innovative solutions you've seen to address these barriers successfully, Lucy?
Thank you, Ali, for this chance. And you pronounce my name right, so it's okay. So women with disability or people with disability generally have a lot of challenges. So some of them, they go from discrimination to accessibility of facilities. It doesn't matter which one, health or job place or school. Yes, financial constraints. It's a whole thing. It's a whole number of problems of challenges that we face. So a lot of these challenges can actually be covered through different solutions. And a solution I can give for access of jobs. Personally, I've been looking for a job and it's hectic for me as a person, as a PWD. But most of the jobs are not inclusive enough. For the workplaces, they're not inclusive enough. You'd be surprised at how many big organizations or structures don't even have ramps where someone who has a wheelchair can walk through, or big doors that should fit, or communication. Some places don't even have a place that a person that can translate for the hearing impaired persons. And I think the job areas should be more inclusive. They should open up to staff that will be accommodative to persons with disability. Another one is offering scholarships to PWDs. A big problem is getting someone has qualifications up to a certain level. They didn't reach the required level for probably financial issues or other things. Maybe someone is needed with a degree, but they reached maybe in secondary or high school. So a scholarship could go so far. Maybe they just need that push to have the education that they need. And in the job place also, I can say skills. Skills is a problem that some of the persons with disability don't have. And creating trainings for people to develop skills that can help them in the job places, I think is a solution that can really help. And a lot of, like in Kenya, there's a policy that says a job place or an organization or a workplace should have at least 5% of them being PWDs. This is not really enforced in these organizations. You'll find it's way less than the 5%. For the whole of, if the employees are like 50, 5% should PWDs, but you'll find employees are like 100, but only 2 of them are PWDs. So the enforcement, the policies are there, but they're not well enforced. So I think this could be helped by monitoring this kind of enforcement, so that they are implemented well and kept through with. Yes, I think that is. I could talk a lot about the problems, but I'll leave it at that. Yes.
Oh, thank you, Lucy. You're doing very well to squeeze in as much information as we can. So many good ideas, but also areas of challenge. And I'm sure if there are any recruiters, you're looking for a job, Lucy, I'm sure we can, hopefully somebody listening to this call can help you out there. What a great member of the team and the workforce you would be if you were there. But real challenges facing those with disability, people with disabilities, and that 5% quota, I suppose, is the figure that you've given there, and the role of enforcement and accountability around that. So much that we could have unpicked in the time, but we will move on to our next speaker, and we'll shift our focus to another pressing challenge: the economic opportunities for marginalized youth. Mr. Simmons-Bright, it's really great to have you with us. You consider that trafficking, or considering the trafficked medical products kill almost 500,000 sub-Saharan Africa's annually. And your work with pedigrees demonstrate how one simple idea can address complex issues. How can we harness similar homegrown ideas to create economic opportunities for marginalized youth? And specifically, what scalable solutions do you envision for transforming local innovations into engines of inclusive economic growth in regions often overlooked for their potential? Right, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jacob. Can you hear me clearly?
Loud and clear. Thank you.
Wonderful. So maybe I'll just start off by talking about my own experience in innovation, and then build up from there. 2 decades ago, roughly 2 decades ago, I was barely 20 years, and I came up on this problem of counterfeit medicines. These are medicines, as you can see on the left side of the screen, that look just like normal medicine, but when you take them, they can kill you. So I saw a documentary on, a major international channel, and a lot of infants in an African country have been given these counterfeit medicines and they died. That set me off on a path of trying to find solutions. I discovered over time, quite surprisingly, that this problem pervades the entire economy. So it's not just about counterfeit medicines. As you can see on the screen, these are actual factories making fake Coca-Cola. On the right side of the screen, there are people that reuse contraceptives and resell them. Essentially, they wash contraceptives, put them back in their packs, and sell them. This is really damaging. And to our minds, the supply chain problem and the trust economy problem are fundamental. If I knew what it would take to solve them, though, today I probably would not have attempted. And so one of the key insights is that the risk-taking capabilities of youth are probably the most important resource we have to the planet's challenge. The fact that I have far less fear than I do today is why I launched into trying to solve this problem. Eventually, we managed to create the world's first end-to-end verification system for patients. That means that you track the product right from the factory as it's manufactured throughout the entire supply chain distribution points until it gets into the hands of the patient. Nigeria was the first country to launch this in 2010. This is still ongoing in Europe and America and other parts of the world in terms of providing that end-to-end traceability. That goes all the way to the patients. So essentially, you pick up your medicine, you're able to use your phone to scan the pack, and it will give you a history of the product in very simple language to validate the product. And that's not whether it's medicine or anything else. And this is being expanded beyond medicines, as I've explained, into agricultural inputs, and very interestingly, into critical green minerals like lithium and other things that are very important for the energy transition. More critically, we're moving from linear traceability, just tracking it from production to consumption, into secular tracking, because nowadays there's recycling, and a lot of that recycling has to be ethical because they can become the cover for a lot of really shady stuff. Now, what did I learn in this process? Pretty simple. A couple of key elements. And I think without these things, it's very difficult for the youth to be very powerful, to be the powerful resource for transformation that I talked about. The first thing I learned is that there are few problems that can be solved only in the private sector or the public sector. You need these engines that connect private, civil, and public. So essentially, you need to bring the government and industry together in these collaborative platforms. Youth, unfortunately, do not have the power to do this. The youth have the passion and the youth have the knowledge. Increasingly, the youth have more knowledge because knowledge is increasingly more digital, and as we've already talked about, the youth are digital natives. Power is the missing piece. One critical way in which we can build power for the youth to be transformative in the way that they go about solving the problems that confront the world is creating innovation infrastructure that naturally favor the youth. Let me give you one last example and wrap it off. When I started building these solutions, I wanted everybody to be able to use them, not only those who have smartphones. That required me to get telecom companies to provide SMS shortcodes that the user without a smartphone can simply send a text message and still get the same response. To get the telephone companies to make this for free, I had to literally build policy myself because these systems didn't exist. And then when we had more than one country, I had to play my own diplomacy, shuttling from country to country. Imagine if there were innovation infrastructure that takes away that burden from youth innovators, so that another 23-year-old starting out trying to build something like this doesn't have to go across countries doing their own diplomacy or building their own policy. So creating innovation infrastructure that grants power to young people so they don't have to do these things from scratch. To my mind, is the most transformative thing we can do to scale youth innovations that are all over the place. And the challenge is just finding scale. Thank you so much, Jacob.
Thank you so much, Brighton, aided by clear presentation as well. There were three words that came to mind as I was listening to your reflections, more or less meaning the same thing. That also you need grit, tenacity, and the initiative to want to do things. Clear skills in the work that you had achieved. But we're going to now move to our final speaker, but we're almost done. So I'm going to encourage you, for those who are keen to ask questions, to do so through the Q&A function. Please keep engaging there. We'll come to your questions very, very soon. Let's discuss the critical issue of youth representation in governance. In addressing youth and underrepresentation in governance, it's often said that it's not about counting the numbers, but making the numbers count. However, with less than 2% of parliamentarians globally under 30, it seems we need to focus on both quantity and quality. Prachi's already nodding her head. But Prachi, how can we innovatively increase youth representation in decision-making bodies while simultaneously ensuring that these young voices have meaningful impact? Prachi.
I love this question. And I think the first step is to have more and more conversation like this so that young people even know that it's possible. Growing up, I had a very fixed image of what a politician looks like, and was always the same. And I'm not about to describe it to you because I'm sure all of you have that image in your head also. The only thing I'm sure all of us know is that that image looks nothing like us. And for some reason in my head, that image also always looks cunning. But it was pleasantly shattered, in fact, early this year when I met a young woman, Emma. And I call her Emma because I met her at one of the key moments, and she looked just like me. She was also a very young person, a young and dynamic person. And we had a long conversation about our time in the city, what it is like as a young person to try and make a difference, about just our lives in general. And by the end of it, we got to talking about what each one of us does. I told her I run an app for climate for information and technology at the government of Namibia. And I was shocked and pleasantly surprised because she was just 23. And it was the first time I realized that a young person like me can even consider something like this. That image in my head was shattered yet again when I got to be a part of round table with a group of parliamentarians from Germany. And I imagined that I'd be going there with, and interacting with a group of people with years of experience behind them. And I was again very shocked to realize that all of them were young women closer to my age, 6 young women who were all part of the parliament. And again, it made me realize that it is possible for a young person to be trusted with important positions like this. And then I started thinking about my own country. And, by the end of the roundtable, I told them that maybe in 10 years' time, we would send our own delegation from India with a group of 6 young parliamentarians. And I hope that that dream does come true. But how can that come true? I think first, what we really need is a perspective shift. Young people, at least in my country, the first thing we need to know that it is not a bad thing to be involved in politics. For some reason, we've always had an image of a politician, and it's a cunning politician. When we talk about joining politics, people are skeptical about your intentions. But the truth is that being a government officials and being involved in policy is one of the largest platforms you can get to make a difference. And so as young people, we always position ourselves as against the system. And we also have to be trained to realize that the system has now slowly started to trust ourselves with positions of power. And so, how can we train ourselves to work within the system and to make those meaningful changes happen? I remember one such young person who's on his way to a career in politics in his home city, Bhind, had come to our town hall in India. And after the town hall, he came to speak with one of the speakers. to get his advice on his career in politics. And the speaker asked him, do you think you have a thick enough skin to survive? What do you think your chance of survival are? And he said, it's a long shot, but I'm going to try anyway. And the speaker said, that's exactly the answer I was looking for, because it is a long shot to make it into politics as a young person in the country in today's day and age. But as long as you realize it and as long as you keep trying, you might just make it. So, we need to create an army of young people who even consider it as a possibility that they can make a career in politics, and we need to train them to work effectively within the system. And conversations like this will play a big role in making that happen. But why do young people need to be involved in politics in the first place? I think the first reason is whenever I see dynamic young people speaking, usually in a room full of people, we are one of the only ones who have gotten a chance to speak. But whenever I see a young person speaking, I see people lifting their heads. I see them stifling their yawns and looking up their notepads. And for the first time, many people start to listen. So it is just a truth that I've experienced time and again, that when young people speak, people listen. And if I'm sure some of us, look into the sessions that happen in politics, and many times those sessions are boring. Many times they are not they're not relatable to the common person. So how do we make politics and policy making relatable to the common people? It is by inviting young people to make it a part of their conversations. I wish
Okay,
that
we're going to pause there, and if in coming to questions, I will encourage you to elaborate and to build on your points. You'll forgive me, Prachi, as I cut you short. It's a topic that's dear to both our hearts. Engaging in politics and in political representation, I'm pleased that in the country that I'm from, Wales, lowered the voting age to 16 only a few years ago in one attempt to try and engage young people with politics. And whilst the beard may fool some, I still class myself as one of those very young and engaged people in politics. I hope to have an influence, possibly outside the cabinet or the parliaments, but equally encouraging those that want to and deserve to be politicians to consider doing so. We've had some great questions through the Q&A. I'm going to test my panel now by asking them to respond, but also to respond in a concise manner in order for us to get through as many questions as possible. And I can see that Amin has dropped out, which may aid in the time that we have. No, he's back with us. Amin, I was worried we'd lost you, but you're back with us, and that's good to see. So we've got a few questions then. This person, anonymous, we'll start with an anonymous person, but I can see some enthusiasm from others named here on the screen in front of me. But maybe if I start, Prachi, where we left off, with the encouragement of how can we encourage the involvement of youth in policy making and intergovernmental conversations? We've talked a little about domestic, national level perhaps, but how do we increase that up the ladder towards that intergovernmental space as well?
Absolutely. I think the first step is to even expand that vision of possibility for young people, that we can become a part of these positions, to even help them aspire for something like this. And that would happen when more and more people like us have these discussions, lead by example and show them that it's possible. It also has to take place from the government, where they show that their willingness to give these positions to young people. And a small change also has to happen in the community, where we are willing to vote for a young person. I think in India, at least, a politician in their mid-40s is considered a young politician. So even the definition of what a young politician looks like is different. I think changes like these take place slowly, but conversations like us definitely help.
Thank you, Prachi, and you've bonus point for keeping it as concise as you could. I know that was quite difficult. We'll move to a question from Maureen, who I know is the Prosperity Action Group changemaker. Thanks, Maureen, for joining us. A question to possibly Bright and Amin here. What are no, forgive me. Well, this is a question targeted specifically for Lucy. We'll come to Amin and Bright shortly. But Lucy, question here: what are some recommendations you can share to address challenges faced by people with disabilities? Because personally, in my country, Zambia, Maureen says, we have tried to do some advocacy exercises, but they are not really considered, especially for young people due to the increase of stigma, which causes further mental problems for them. How do you respond to Maureen, some of those recommendations that you can give? Just checking, Lucy. There we go. You're good to go.
Yes. So sorry, what was the question?
That's okay. I'll rephrase. So we're looking for some recommendations on how to address challenges faced by people with disabilities. The stigma comes up, but how can we address some of the challenges that possibly cause further mental problems for them as well? So a multitude of challenges there.
Yeah. So most of the challenges can be through advocacy. Apart from advocacy, you can involve the persons with disability themselves. Involvement is very key. You know, there's a thing that goes nothing for us without us. So when you bring them on board, you start. That is a very big step in inviting them to share the problems. So when they share the problems, they share what can be done for them. Like for us, most of the time we share something amongst ourselves. As PWDs, we actually have a young women with disability. So as women ourselves, we share our problems amongst ourselves, then present them, and then present possible solutions to organizations and to other people. That is how I think it will begin. You know, when you just go out there trying to do advocacy and stuff like that, it doesn't really work exactly without involving the people. Yeah.
Thank you, Lucy. Forgive me for not articulating the question correctly at the beginning there, but you did a really good job. Thank you. I'm being pushed to time to the screen next to me, Bright and Amin, so I'm going to allow you to respond with one sentence, if you can, to this important question, which is talking about the emphasis on softer skills, the importance of skills that possibly you don't learn about through a curriculum in education, and about the importance of communication, the importance of creativity, the arts, about communication, of working in collaboration with others. Can you talk to us about the importance and what steps can be taken to emphasize the importance of soft skills, as they are coined, although I don't particularly like that phrase, but these skills are important. What can we do to emphasize them around communication, etc.? Amin, over to you first.
All right, thanks, Jacob. Well, these skills are very important. Soft skills are very important in the entrepreneurial world, in the employment world, and generally in life. For example, I use myself as a clear example. I saw myself as someone who lacked most of these skills, right? And I could see even from my interaction with people when I first got into the world of entrepreneurship, and in my interactions with a lot of people higher up. What really helped me to overcome most of these challenges and boost my confidence in this world was getting myself engaged and involved in the whole community of entrepreneurs. In Ghana, we have this Impact Hub of Accra, we have iSpace, these communities where entrepreneurs and mentors would come, engage each other, and then share their experiences, their knowledges and expertise with the young ones to grow certain skills that we lacked. Also helped me in developing and building my confidence. So I really believe these skills are very important. Most importantly, communication and how to really interact, because at the end of the day, you are a business, you're selling something, and how you're able to communicate whatever it is that you're selling to the end user is key. And the ability to do that can never be understated. So yeah, get yourself engaged with some community and learn from each other.
Forgive me. It's the terrible job of cutting people short when we've got time. As a former journalist, I'm doing particularly poorly at keeping to time. My former colleagues would not be impressed with me. But Bright, you will end this segment with your reflections on the importance of soft skills. Thank you.
So it's a fantastic question, but I would like to provoke and push back a little bit and say in the world of artificial intelligence, there is only one skill, imagination. And I feel that coupled with courage, potentially you can apply all the other skills. So my view about soft skills would be that keep on about imagination, focus on the courage, and the world is your oyster.
Succinct and clear and insightful. Well, thank you to all my panelists on the panel. It's been a truly inspirational segment. I'm going to hand you back to Druvak. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Jack. And thank you to all our panelists for their valuable insights and contributions. It's been a fascinating conversation, starting with solutions on climate change. We heard about how young people are using their emotions as strength and rather than as a weakness. We heard an example of co-creating solutions at the highest political levels. And this panel was particularly insightful on skills as a means to addressing problems. And I think the general spirit of throwing ourselves at the deep end and then trying to figure out how to solve the problem is something that really appeals to me as well. So now we move to a final interactive segment designed to engage all of you. In this segment, we will use a Miro board to brainstorm and add solutions to the challenges we've discussed today. This is an excellent opportunity for everyone who's been active in the chat to actively contribute their ideas and innovative solutions based on your experiences and based on what we've heard today. Join the link that is now in the chat. You will see 3 columns on the Miro board representing each of the issues that we've heard about today: the climate crisis, economic inequality, and the lack of political representation. So it's now your turn to share your innovative solutions to these challenges. Let's try and think outside of the box. And remember, no idea is a bad idea. We're here to build together. So on the Miro board, click on a post-it note under the issue that you want to tackle and write your idea. Please feel free to also use the Zoom chat if you are unable to use the Miro board to add your ideas, and our team will work to put these solutions on the Miro board. So I hope everyone has been able to reach the Miro board. I can already see some pioneers and some artisans and some sculptors and artists on the Miro board. If you haven't been able to yet, please look at the chat. The link will direct you to a Miro board where you can pick one of the 3 problems that you want to address and add a solution on one of the post-it notes. Ideas coming in, giving private sector taxes on pollution, something that Pele also indicated at the top as a solution to climate crisis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you focus time. Let me give you 5 minutes to jam to some music as you think about these ideas for these big solutions. Louis, I hope you've got the music ready, and here we go. Fabulous. I can see some very bright ideas coming through. We've got 1 more minute to go. A lot of support for lowering the voting age. Jack, do you want to come in and just talk about the Welsh experience perhaps a little bit? Has that moved the needle? How has that led to better decision making? Private school funding, going to public schools as well. It's very important. Something that Amin also pointed to, that what we're studying in school really needs to be in sync with the skills that we require to solve real world problems. And I wonder if Louis, perhaps if you can zoom in on some of these, and if there are any reactions from our speakers, if they're still around. Recycling and reusing stuff where possible, absolutely. And thank you for everyone who's also putting their solutions in the chat. Decentralized jobs. I wonder what that's about. Adequate training of staff and junior staff. Okay. I think in the interest of time, Ines, do we want to have the poll up so that we can also vote alongside and head towards the closing as well? And meanwhile, I hope everyone can keep adding their solutions to Miro board as well. Fabulous, folks. The last poll question for today: how optimistic, based on what you've heard, based on your experiences, based on whatever we've heard today, how optimistic are you about solving these three challenges in the next decade: climate crisis, lack of political representation, and economic inequality? I'm hopeful, but staying realistic is winning. Wow, okay, there's a real race picking up now. Fabulous. I think the general sense is that people are hopeful, but a cautious hope. And I hope that this really keeps up. And my takeaway for today is, own the problem and throw yourselves in it. So I think as we're hopeful, we are also realistic about the scale of the problems, but we keep on working towards them. Okay, fabulous. So with that, I will bring the session to a close. Thank you all for joining us today. It's been great to have a meaningful and insightful creative brainstorming session. I'd like to thank all our moderators, Eunice, Nandini, Jack, and all our speakers who took the time to come in and share their experiences with us today. These insights are particularly valuable as we continue along this journey grounded in human-centered design to build a 2100 roadmap. I hope that all the action groups were also able to learn today by listening and engaging with our participants. I hope all the participants go back today feeling like they can make a difference, realizing that there is power in intergenerational conversations, in our voice as young people, and most importantly, in our actions. Your voice and feedback are important, so do share it with us. We also want to know what your vision for the future is. So please take a minute to join in on the UN Foundation's global campaign to raise awareness on the Summit of the Future by filling in one sentence in the form that's coming up in the chat now. Once upon a future, and what? What did we solve for? So hopefully that form will be up in the chat. We've heard clearly. It's in the chat now. So please go in there and fill in that line on what you imagine the future to be as well. We know a lot of you are enthusiastic about getting even more involved. We've had that sense on the chat today. So sign up for the engine room by clicking in the next link that will come into the chat. I can see it's already there in the form of sign up for the engine room. This will give you access to all our regular updates, quarterly newsletters, partner opportunities that you don't want to miss out on. If you want to participate directly, and there was a question in the chat on this as well, in developing the learning agenda, we are also hosting in-person town halls across the world, and you can join the one that is nearest to you. Coming up in the next couple of weeks are Mexico and Sweden, and many, many more in the later weeks. More details, of course, one of the links in the chat. So as we collaboratively build the 2100 agenda, join us for the next Engine Room Curtain Laser on September 13. All of these spaces are for you to contribute your experiences and thoughts to the Summit of the Future, which is a reminder is the UN's way of thinking about its own future on how to improve itself to deliver for you. So we need your voices to be front and center. And finally, it has been my honor and pleasure to host you all. Let us know with an emoji how the session was today. And while you do that, I would like to invite Ipsita, who's been illustrating today's spotlight session, to share her screen. Okay, fabulous. So let's stay connected. Be sure to follow the Our Future Agenda pages on all social media handles for more insights, events, and opportunities. It's been great having you all here. Thank you to all of the panelists for joining us and for staying on. Bright, Amin, the ones that I can see, but I'm sure there's others. And have a great rest of the day, evening, or night. Thank you very much.